Welcome to Reimagine Models. In today's video, we are beginning to reimagine our imagination to form these two cars into a custom build from the 1977 movie Damnation Alley. We will use this photo as a guide to create our custom. In this custom, we will need to remove the base from the body. We will do this with a drill in a series of steps that will allow us to do that. Rivets are what hold the base and car body together, and we need to remove them. I have a video showing this step in greater detail, and I will link that above.
Well now, you two gonna continue your life of nonconformity? You wanna come along with us?
The first step that I like to do is form a pilot hole for our 256 tap. I find this easiest to do when the rivet is still fully intact on the car. Once the base is removed, you will have a good starting point to drill the post. Here is a better look at the pilot hole I was talking about. This will aid you once the car body is removed and to be able to drill a straight hole for our tap. Here I am trying a new product I found on Amazon. It is a small vise that looked to be useful to hold cars while drilling. I'm still trying it out and I do not have a verdict on it just yet. I still think an actual metal vise would be the best tool for this job. This is a 1/32 size bit we will use to remove the top of the rivet to finally allow us to remove the base from the body. I am still trying out this little vise and you can see some possible dangerous situations that could happen. See how the car slips in my hands, how thin the front of the car is? With these type of cars you can drill through the rivet if not careful and hurt yourself. Let's learn from my possible mistakes and use a proper vise for this step.
Damnation Alley.
As you can see, I've begun to remove that top rivet. Just go slow with this step and keep checking to see if you have removed enough material to do so. You do not want to drill into the base, enlarging the hole, which would cause the hex screws to not hold the base to the body. If you believe you have removed enough material to remove the base, give it a try. I'm using a 256 hex driver to pry the base away, but any useful tool will do the job. If you plan to reuse the wheels, you would want to be careful not to bend the axles. I am replacing my wheels, so I do not care if I do. Sometimes this is an easy step, and other times it's much harder.
Hey, bugs. Armor-plated cockroaches.
The car is in separate pieces now, allowing us to continue with our custom. I like to use these little boxes to hold all the parts during the various steps, so nothing is lost. I happen to pick these up at Michael's for $1 each. You can also find similar items at Dollar Tree. At this stage of the build, I'm trying to figure out how exactly I'm going to do this. How am I going to cut these two cars to form one longer version? My thought process is still processing at this moment. However I decide to cut the cars, I will need what is called a jeweler's saw to do it. This will work well to cut the cars to the length that I need to form my custom. Here is a closer look at that saw with the blade attached. As you can see, it is adjustable and you can quite easily use this tool to do a lot of things with your customs. I would highly recommend it.
This whole town is infested with killer cockroaches.
Alright, let's avoid those killer cockroaches. It began to hit me what this build was beginning to look like. As I began my first initial cut, a thought entered my mind. Well, rather a movie did. It was Damnation Alley, a movie about the aftermath of a nuclear war. The front half was a little easier to cut than the rear. I only needed to cut the sides and it would come free from the body. Just take your time with these steps and keep checking your work as you go. Here you can see I have one side cut and now I only need to cut the other side to free the front from the rest of the body. I really love this saw and it really has opened a ton of possibilities for my customs. It's quite easy to use and you can even cut out doors with it if you're careful doing it. Just a little bit more and you can even begin to hear when it will cut through and fall off. This is where the aha moment popped into my brain. Damnation Alley. Then I knew where this build direction was headed. The rear was a little more difficult to cut since I needed to cut the entire half. Not a problem cutting, but to have them be seamless would be difficult. I had no choice but to cut near a window frame, which would leave the two sides to appear uneven. I began to proceed with the cut and see what I could do later to solve this problem. I am taking my time with this part of the build. I want my cuts to be straight so the car would attach well. I first cut the sides and used them as a guide to cut the top part. This method worked quite well, and as you can see, the body came free and we look to be in good shape with the build. I wasn't quite happy with how the two halves would connect, and then I realized after looking at some pictures of the vehicle used in the movie, I discovered it had a diaphragm in the middle. This would be perfect to solve the seamless issues. As I began to clean up the edges of the two halves, I noticed one of the halves just did not look right. So I began to cut a small bit of one of the halves off to correct this issue. It's amazing just what this saw can do. It cut that small little piece off with ease. Now we are in business, and later on in this build I will scratch build a diaphragm to be attached in the middle with some evergreen plastic. I may do it in such a way to have the vehicle turning in one direction, as I plan to do a mini diorama with this build in a future video. Before I add the diaphragm, I am going to have to come up with a solution to make the two halves symmetrical on either side. As you can see here, the left side of the car was cut too close to the window frame. I want to make it more like the right side so it will look better once attached. The next step I'm going to take is to cut the interior base to fit the build. However, I realized I would need another car to do this. Since adding the diaphragm, I would be extending the length of the car. I will be using the castings as a guide to help to cut the two halves to fit the bodies of the car. This should be an easy step in the process of the build, but I did make an error in this step, and luckily I have that extra car to correct my mistake. Just need to clean the edges and we will have our first half done. This is where the extra car part came in handy, as I cut the base too short, and what I ended up doing to correct this error was to cut down the middle of the seats. This allowed the piece to fit correctly. And now we have the two halves cut to size and the build is moving along nicely. The next step in the build, we will scratch build that diaphragm, but we will see that in part 2 of this series. And I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.